Yes, my wife cheated on me, and yes, she left me for another man. And yes, at first I was full of rage and wanted to destroy them both. But that did not happen. However, I suppose this is a revenge story, but I never intended for it to be that way. My name is Randy Clipson, and I'm a regular guy. I'm not handsome, and I've been overweight for most of my life. Things changed in high school because I played football, and it was because of football that I got the nickname Chipper. They used to say that if I chip someone, he will fall. When you're 6'3" and 260 pounds, you're expected to play football. I wasn't a great athlete, but I had significant upper body strength, even in high school, and could push a defender back. Playing football helped me a lot throughout my 4 years of school. First of all, I lost most of the fat that I had been carrying around with me most of my life. Even though I still had a bit of a belly, the muscle I had accumulated more than made up for it. However, if you've been fat most of your life, you tend to think of yourself as fat. Add to that mindset, I was painfully shy because I was teased about my weight throughout elementary and middle school. Now, in high school, I was a football player, and no one made fun of me anymore. Being a member of the football team also came with certain privileges. I was no longer an outcast among girls. Do not misunderstand me. I didn't attract any cheerleaders, but some girls were more than willing to go on a date with me. However, I didn't date much until my senior year. That's when I met Cindy. Cindy Crowley moved to our school towards the end of my first year. So, even though she was in my class, I didn't pay attention to her until my senior year. Cindy had the most beautiful face I had ever seen. However, she was at least 30 to 40 pounds overweight. This alienated most of the boys in my class, and I'm not proud of it, but at first I wasn't interested in Cindy either. I only really got to know her when we were paired up for chemistry. Chemistry was more than difficult for me, but not for Cindy, so she helped me a lot. I would even say that if it weren't for Cindy, I would have failed chemistry and probably wouldn't have gotten into college. Plus, while we were partners, I learned how friendly and fun she is. I also learned that we have something in common. We both went to school late. Cindy had a congenital heart defect that took a year and a half to correct. I was born at the end of the year, and then my parents decided to keep me for a year. This meant that Cindy and I were both 19. It took all my courage, but I finally decided to ask her out. I think she was suspicious of my intentions at first. I really couldn't blame her. As bad as my early school years were, hers were much worse. She was always the object of cruel jokes and ridicule. However, she reluctantly agreed to go on a date with me. It was a simple date where I just took her to a movie and then went out for ice cream. It was a fun date, but I was too shy to try and kiss her. Instead, I shook her hand and asked if I could call her. I saw that she was delighted. Over the next few weeks, we went on several dates. By the third date, I plucked up the courage to kiss Cindy on the cheek. We then went to scrimmage with me and got to first base. The more I saw of Cindy, the more I cared for her. As my budding romance progressed, football season took an unexpected direction. My high school, Caverton High, was never a football powerhouse. But this season, all the stars seemed to be aligned. Kirk Simmons was our star quarterback, and we had the Bailey twins, Todd and Jason, as our running backs. Now I was left tackle, covering Kirk's blind side. I did a good enough job that Kirk was never fired by anyone who came from my side. We lost our first game of the season to Mohawk High School by a score of 21-17. Mohawk High has always been a consistent football power. After that game, we won 7 games in a row and advanced to regionals. We made it to the state finals before Towson High beat us 28-14. However, it wasn't all bad. We knocked off Mohawk High in the semifinals 38-7. It was very nice. Sorry, I don't often get to relive the glory days of high school football. I couldn't resist. Be that as it may, my romance with Cindy continued. When prom season arrived, I immediately asked Cindy to go on a date with me. She squealed with delight and took it with great pleasure. 4 weeks before prom, Cindy was on a strict diet. She lost about 20 pounds to fit into the prom dress she bought. When I picked her up for graduation, My eyes nearly popped out of my head. Even though she was still what most guys would consider fat, I thought she was gorgeous. Cindy has always had big breasts, but they were never that noticeable until I saw her in that blue prom dress. The dress could barely contain her breasts as they threatened to spill out. That night was a dream for both of us as we danced with each other all evening. As the evening ended, I wanted to go to the park with Cindy, but she had other ideas. Directing me into a wooded area about 30 miles from town, Cindy explained that her uncle had a small cabin that he used when he wanted to go hunting. She was really small. There was only a tiny kitchen, a sofa in front of the TV, a bed, and a bathroom. On the couch, we started fooling around as usual. After about 20 minutes, we made love. Despite our extracurricular activities, I dropped Cindy home 15 minutes before her 2 a.m. curfew. Cindy and I remained close throughout the rest of high school. We had sex whenever we could, but we were always careful to use protection. Upon graduation, I was offered a partial scholarship to play soccer at a Division Roman II university 2 states away. Cindy chose to attend a local community college. My specialty was computer science, and hers was psychology. Since I was about to leave for school, we discussed what to do with our relationship. By mutual agreement, we decided to separate. We felt it was unfair to bind each other. It was the hardest decision I've ever made. I can't even explain how terrible I felt leaving for college and leaving Cindy behind. She told me that if we were meant to be together, we would be together. I was afraid that I would lose her. I was in so much pain when I arrived at Mountain Ridge University that I almost drove back home. But I couldn't do it. I made a commitment to the university, and I was going to fulfill it. Besides, I really wanted to get a higher education. The only thing I could think of was to throw myself into work and study. From the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed, I worked hard to keep my mind occupied. My coaches and teachers were impressed with my work ethic. Despite the fact that the trainers did not recommend it, I took the full course of training. One of the benefits of being a college football player is that they burned off the last of my fat and replaced it with muscle. This, combined with strength training, has given me not only upper body strength, but lower body strength as well. Since I only had a partial scholarship, my parents covered the remaining expenses. I knew it was difficult for them to cope with this, but since I played football, I could not help financially. I didn't have money to travel home, but I called Cindy every week. It seemed that she was suffering from our breakup just as much as I was. My first year of college has come to an end, and it has been a successful one from a football and academic standpoint. I entered the starting lineup for the third game of the season. I was too slow for the tackle position, so they moved me inside to the left guard position. My extra strength allowed me to create passing lanes for our runners, and we finished the season with a record of 8 wins and 2 losses. Academically, I ended the year on the dean's list. My parents were delighted. Over the summer, Cindy and I rekindled our relationship. I was head over heels in love with her. Or at least that's what I thought at the time. I wondered for a long time if we were truly in love or if it was just attraction. After much thought, I think that, at least for me, it was love, because a small part of me still loves her. I worked during the summer and took 3 online courses. I was determined to finish college as quickly as possible. Cindy and I also resumed our sexual relationship. I explored her body in every possible way at every opportunity. I graduated from college in 3 years and married Cindy right after graduation. We both took jobs at the same multinational software and electronics company in Virginia, Triarbit Electronics. I worked in software development and Cindy worked in human resources. After 2 years, we had saved enough money to buy a small house and started thinking about having a family. Our first 3.5 years of marriage were wonderful, except for one thing. We both gained a lot of weight. Cindy had gained up to 230 pounds, and I weighed 310 pounds. I was able to carry the extra weight better due to my height. Neither of us was happy being overweight, but neither of us could stick to the diet. As for me, I loved Cindy, no matter her size. After 3 years of marriage and no children, we turned to our family doctor, After conducting a series of tests, he found nothing wrong with either of us, but suggested that we lose weight. He believed it might help Cindy get pregnant. So, for the first time in our lives, we went on a strict diet. After 6 months, Cindy had lost 50 pounds. I only lost 25, but I confess that I cheated more than I should have. Cindy's weight loss was noticeable. I noticed that men began to pay attention to her like never before. In addition to her diet, Cindy started going to the gym 5 times a week. Watching her transformation, I realized that I needed to pull myself together. I started sticking to our diet strictly and going to the gym with her. After a year of dieting, Cindy had lost 80 pounds and I had lost 90. We both felt great, but unfortunately our weight loss left me heartbroken. As Cindy continued to lose weight, she began wearing increasingly revealing clothes. I really liked it at first, but when I started hearing some comments at work, I was unhappy. But I couldn't say anything because Cindy had been an ugly duckling all her life. Now she has turned into a beautiful swan. The real problem for me came when Kirk Simmons was named head of human resources. He became a senior director of the company. I was just a senior programmer. He was now 2 levels above me, and he became Cindy's boss. At first, I didn't attach any importance to it. Kirk was married to Susie Looper, who was a cheerleader in high school. I saw her at corporate events, and she was still quite attractive. I would barely have noticed her if it weren't for my wife, who asked me to dance with her while she was dancing with her boss. I danced with Susie a couple of times at the Christmas party, while Kirk danced with Cindy. But one thing that pleasantly surprised me was that she was not an arrogant snob. "I didn't recognize you or Cindy when Kirk and I arrived," Susie complimented us. "You look amazing. I always thought Cindy had a pretty face, but now she's a real beauty. You better keep an eye on her." "Thank you, that's very nice of you," I said, a little embarrassed. "You look great too. Kirk looks exactly the same as he did in high school, and you look even better." "Thank you, that's very nice of you." Susie blushed slightly when the music ended. 5 months before our 4th anniversary, Cindy told me she was starting to take the pill again. "What about the children?" I objected. "I've decided I don't want them yet," she said sharply. "Oh, just like that, you decided." I was furious. "Listen, we're going to have kids," she said, stroking my hand. "I just don't want to get fat again. I want to enjoy being thin for a while." I should have realized that the problem had already started then, but I was naive. I trusted Cindy completely. Unfortunately, I couldn't trust Kirk any more than I could have abandoned the bus. Unknown to me, Kirk began to aggressively pursue Cindy. She was, of course, incredibly flattered that the former captain of our high school football team was pursuing her. I first started to worry when Cindy started staying late at work and then supposedly going out with her friends in the evenings. I was genuinely naive about these things, but not stupid. When Cindy started coming home later and later, I began to suspect something was wrong. I didn't want to believe she was cheating on me, but I couldn't ignore the signs. I hired a private detective agency, and within a week they had all the evidence they needed. They had a video of Cindy and Kirk having sex in the office. How they got it, I have no idea. They had photos of them hugging during dinner. They had videos of Kirk coming to my house while I was at work. And finally, they had pictures of them having sex on our living room floor. I knew they made them through the front window of our house. Remember when I said I couldn't accurately describe how I felt the first time I had sex with Cindy? Well, I don't have words to describe the pain I felt when I found out that my wife was cheating on me. Not only that, but she cheated with someone I considered my friend. Yes, Kirk and I weren't close, but I still considered him a friend. It was incredibly painful. I still hoped that when I ran into Cindy, she would come to her senses. I loved her and thought that she loved me too. I took the evidence home that evening, and after dinner I told Cindy that we needed to talk. She looked at me curiously, but sat down at the kitchen table to listen. "Cindy, I know you're cheating on me with Kirk," I said quietly as I laid out the photos and videos in front of her. Cindy immediately turned white, then covered her face with her hands. She started crying and ran to the bathroom. I went over and knocked on the door, but she refused to open it. I was waiting in the kitchen with a glass of rum. Finally, she came out and sat at the kitchen table with her head down. "What can you say?" I said coldly. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, your clothes just fell down and you accidentally had sex?" "No need to be rude," Cindy flared. "If you had paid more attention to me, this wouldn't have happened." I was stunned, and for a moment I thought that perhaps I had really neglected her, but then rage flared within me. "Don't try to blame it on me. I didn't do anything wrong. You were the one who cheated. You got caught. What can you say in your defense?" She looked at me nervously, but didn't say anything. "So what are we going to do about it?" I tried to control my anger. "Do you want to be with Kirk or with me?" "I love you, Randy, but I also love Kirk," she said and started crying again. "Well, you'll have to choose," I said, almost biting my lips. "And I want to know by tomorrow what you choose. If you want to stay with me, you will never see Kirk again. You have to quit your job, and we have to go to counseling." Cindy nodded. I went into our bedroom and took out all of her things and threw them into the hallway. "You can sleep in the guest room until you make a decision." The next day I came home early. The truth is that I couldn't concentrate and was less than useless. My stomach was churning all day. At one point in the morning, I thought I was going to throw up from what I ate for breakfast. Around 6 o'clock in the evening, Cindy came in with a very nervous look on her face. I sat on the kitchen table, just like the previous night. She sat down opposite me. "So, have you made your decision?" I asked demandingly. Tears flowed down her cheeks. "You know I love you, Randy, but I just can't give up on Kirk. I love him too." I took a deep breath to hide the fact that my heart was breaking. "Well, you've made your choice." Cindy simply nodded, which was worse than someone stabbing me with a knife. My brain was ready to explode. I went back and forth between the idea of killing them both and curling up in a corner and crying. "You picked a real winner," I said sarcastically. "Kirk and Susie just had a baby boy. Aren't you worried about leaving this baby without a father?" A small flash of anger and guilt flashed across Cindy's face. Kirk was going to divorce Susie before we even started dating. "So you're just throwing away almost 4 years of marriage?" I asked, fighting not only anger, but also tears. Honestly, at that moment, I was seriously thinking about beating Cindy and then going to break Kirk's neck. "I'm sorry I hurt you, Randy," she said softly, tenderness in her voice. "I didn't want it to happen. I just fell in love with Kirk, and he fell in love with me. I should be with him." My hands were shaking with an incredible desire to break her neck at that moment, but I knew I had to control myself. It took all my self-control to cope, but I was finally able to do it. Somewhere deep in the logical part of my brain, I knew that violence would achieve nothing. I didn't want her to know how deeply she hurt me, and there was no way I was going to beg her to stay. I think this is the worst thing a deceived husband can do. It's just a sign of complete weakness. "Okay," I said simply, "if you want a divorce, you can get one." There was a look of confusion in her eyes, and maybe I was making it up, but also a little bit of pain. Perhaps she thought I would fight to keep her. But I knew in my heart that if she decided to leave, there was nothing I could do or say to stop her. Cindy was completely taken aback by my behavior, but she stood up and began to gather her things. The next day I went to the bank and to our financial advisor. I explained what was happening and withdrew half of the funds from each account. Then I opened separate accounts in my name. I canceled all of our credit cards and applied for new ones in my name. I visited a realtor friend of mine and put our house up for sale. Finally, I visited a divorce lawyer. With a lot of hatred in my heart, I did everything possible to ensure that Cindy was notified at work. I also listed adultery as a reason for divorce. The divorce itself was relatively simple. Since we had only been married about 4 years and had no children, there was nothing to dispute. We divided everything in half and went our separate ways. Kirk's divorce was much more complicated. He had a child under 1 year old, and Susie never worked. He had to pay alimony and child support. One of the things I found mildly enjoyable about Kirk's divorce was that he decided to skimp on a lawyer. Instead of limiting spousal maintenance to a year or two, it was fixed at 15 years. Kirk was unhappy, but signed the papers. 2 months after their divorces were finalized, Kirk and Cindy got married. It was bitter medicine. The first week after the breakup, I was completely lost. I'm not a big drinker, so this method didn't appeal to me. For weeks, I was consumed with trying to come up with a plan to get revenge on Kirk and Cindy. I'm sure every deceived husband goes through this. I even started searching the internet for information about how ex-husbands took revenge on their ex-wives and lovers. I was in a very dark place. I even bought a pistol. Then I started reading story after story about people who took revenge. At first, my thoughts about revenge included violence. I then began planning to destroy their property, but quickly realized that both of these plans would only harm me. There were stupid ideas like puncturing all their tires, putting sugar in the gas tank, flooding their new home, and a bunch of other ridiculous thoughts. The more revenge stories I read, the more I realized how ridiculous they were. I have not found a single way to achieve the desired revenge. Finally, I sought counseling from my pastor. The pastor talked to me for almost 2 hours. He explained that the pain of my wife's betrayal would not go away with any kind of revenge. No matter how much I hurt my ex-wife or her new husband, the pain will still remain. The pastor's advice was quite simple for someone with my pain. He said that only time and distance will heal my heart. Although I wasn't sure I believed him, I realized that being around Cindy and not being able to be with her would open a wound every time I saw her. I also realized that the pastor was right about one thing. Revenge will not stop the pain, so I followed his advice. This meant I had to stay away from Cindy. My chance came when I heard rumors that the company was in trouble. It turned out that the company had entered into a contract with the Ministry of Defense. The deal promised big profits, but had a downside. Our firm was required to develop completely new software and electronics for Air Force fighters and bombers. It's completely classified, so I can't even begin to talk about it. Suffice it to say that this should have put the U.S. head and shoulders above the Russians and Chinese. Of course, if my company can do it. There were rumors that the project was seriously behind schedule and over budget. Typically, no one bothered much about government contracts, but this one was different. Of course, there could be big profits. However, there were great risks for the company. Unlike other government projects, this one involved no milestone payments while the software and associated electronic components were developed. The company also had to pay huge fines if it did not complete the project on time. In fact, if a company does not successfully complete a project under contract, it will likely go bankrupt. As one of the senior software developers at the company, I was called in to consult on an impending disaster. All the other developers did not want to touch this project even a tenth of an inch. In fact, most of them were updating their resumes and looking for ways to leave the company. If you took it on and failed, not only would you be fired, but the company would probably go out of business. The stigma of this failure would remain with you for a long time. But at that point in my life, I thought, why not? I didn't have much to lose. Now that I was divorced, I had very modest needs. If I lost my job, so what? I could handle it. Plus, I just found out that Cindy was now pregnant. It was like a stab in the heart. I always believed that Cindy and I would one day start our own family. I looked at all the data they gave me on this project for the Air Force. It was clear that the chosen direction would never work. I agreed to take on the assignment and headed to California. I was going to put about 3,000 miles between my ex-wife and me. As I did during my first year of college, I threw myself into my work. My days were long, sometimes 20 hours long, which didn't leave much time to think about Cindy. I fired 3/4 of the programmers and all the engineers working on electronic components. I brought new people. I literally threw away everything that had been done up to that point, even though our deadline was only 11 months away. I knew nothing about engineering, but I brought some of the most creative engineers into the company to work with me. I even poached some really great engineers from competing companies. When I explained to them what I wanted them to build, they were skeptical. But when I explained why I wanted electronic components to be made this way, they were amazed. They suddenly realized how simple my idea was. However, I still needed to make the software work. Slowly but surely, we created a program that I was happy with. But it wasn't until 3 weeks before we were supposed to deliver our product to the military that I knew we'd made it. Our first test, which combined software and electronic components, showed a 96% success rate. And when I scanned the 4% that didn't work, I knew it was easy to fix. When it was announced that our program was working, the company's stock soared over 300 points in a couple of months. Then the Department of Defense announced that they were expanding our contract to include the Navy, Army, and Marines. We were talking about billions of dollars in profits, but it didn't end there. I realized that we could simplify the program and it would have many commercial applications. We basically stripped away all the classified information, and it turned out to be a great platform for a lot of practical applications. The list of things this program could be adapted to seemed endless. Following this success, I was promoted to Senior Vice President and put in charge of commercial application development. Over the ensuing years, I returned frequently to the headquarters in Virginia. I did not meet Kirk or Cindy during these visits. Even though I thought it wouldn't have any effect on me, I didn't want to face them. I had nothing to say to them after all this time. The pastor who gave me advice about time and distance after heartache was absolutely right. I moved on. During one of my visits, I met Kelly Bailey. She was a cheerleader in high school. She and Susie were best friends. I knew that she married Jason Bailey and had a son. Before I found Cindy, I always had a crush on Kelly. She was the most beautiful cheerleader, but Kelly had such a warm manner that it was impossible not to love her. She was voted most popular in high school. Kelly had aged a little, but was still quite attractive. Physically, she was the complete opposite of Cindy. While Cindy had short blonde hair and very large breasts, Kelly was petite with long black hair. She was barely 5 feet 3 inches tall, and her breasts, although proportionate, were significantly smaller than Cindy's. One thing they had in common was a smile that radiated warmth. I was amazed that she recognized me. I was at the grocery store buying a few things because I had to make a presentation to the board of directors. Formal updates with the council always meant I would be in town for a week. The company had several apartments for executives who came from other regions. They were furnished, but there was never food there. "Randy, is that you?" Kelly called me when I was trying to decide which frozen dinners to buy. I recognized her immediately and blushed slightly when she said my name again. I think I still had a little crush on her, even though she had a few gray hairs and a few wrinkles. "Kelly," I smiled as she stopped her cart next to mine. "I'm flattered that you recognize me." "I wouldn't have known," she admitted, "if Susie hadn't pointed you out when she came to lunch with me at Triorbit." "Do you work at Triorbit?" I was truly amazed. She smiled and nodded. "I've been working there for about 6 years. I do marketing." I was surprised to find out that Kelly works for the same company as me. I felt a little guilty for not knowing this. However, I had little to do with marketing, so I shouldn't have felt bad. Still, I felt like I should have known. "How are you doing?" I finally asked to cover up my embarrassment. "I'm doing the best I can," she said with sadness in her voice. "I'm divorced now. Jason turned out to be a real scoundrel. He cheated with his secretary and half a dozen other women. He even got one of them pregnant. I divorced him, of course. He got off easy, considering what he did. There was no alimony because our salaries are about the same. We had no home and little savings. All he had to do was pay child support. But I have to remind him of this every month. It doesn't bother me that I have to get money, but he completely ignores our son Scott. I get angry when I think about it." "I'm so sorry, Kelly," I apologized. "I always knew Jason was a little wild, but I thought he'd calm down when he got married." I stopped for a moment and looked into Kelly's beautiful emerald green eyes. I didn't know what to say next, so I decided to just sympathize with her. "I think you know that my wife and I got divorced. Cindy decided to go after Todd." "No, Randy," Kelly shook her head. Kirk was the one stalking Cindy. Susie told me everything. I can't argue with that, I admitted, but it takes two to tango. Are you really going to eat these frozen dinners? She asked, looking around my cart. Yes, I'm afraid so, I nodded. I'm a terrible cook, and this is all I can handle. Listen, if you want home-cooked food, come to my house. It won't be anything special, but I guarantee it will be delicious. I almost gave up, but the thought of home-cooked food was something I couldn't resist. If it wouldn't be an inconvenience, I'd love to eat real food. I can't remember the last time I had the chance. That evening was amazing. Kelly made meatloaf with mashed potatoes, green beans, and sorbet for dessert. It was nice to have someone to talk to. Scotty, as his mother called him, was a very sociable and friendly child. I learned that he, like me, is a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. We had a fun chat about the team and their prospects for the upcoming season. I was a true fan and season ticket holder. In fact, I had 4 season tickets to every Buccaneers home game at the 50th-yard line. The company paid for them because I invited potential clients to games. When I had no clients, I invited my friends. And if I couldn't find anyone to go with me, I went to the games myself. I gave the remaining 3 tickets, usually to those who tried to buy from a speculator. I wish I could go to a game someday, Scotty said, looking dreamy. I can arrange it, I said impulsively. As soon as the words left my mouth, I realized that I had overstepped my bounds and quickly tried to correct it. Sure, if your mom approves. Scotty looked at his mother with pleading eyes. All she said was, "We'll talk about it." At the end of the evening, I apologized. Sorry about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers thing. That was said before I knew what I was saying. But just so you know, I have 4 season tickets to all Buccaneers home games and plenty of frequent flyer miles. Do you mind if he goes to the game with me? I'd love to take him. She looked at me with a piercing gaze. It was then that I realized that I had made another mistake. I immediately tried to fix this too, but created another one. The invitation extends to you. After a short pause, I stammered, I'd get separate rooms for us. You and Scotty will be in one, and I'll be in the other. I felt my face heat up at my stupid behavior, but Kelly just smiled. You are the sweetest person, she said, laughing. Your expression is priceless. I sighed with relief. I really didn't mean to offend Kelly. I really enjoyed her company and hoped that we could see each other from time to time. I decided to continue. Do you mind if I call you when I'm in town? If you have someone, I'll understand. I just really liked having someone to talk to. Kelly studied me for a long time, then smiled. Randy, I've known you since high school. I always thought you were sweet and one of the kindest guys, but I never considered dating you because I had Jason. Now that I've gotten to know you a little better, yeah, I'd love for you to call me. And I'd love to go to a Tampa Bay Buccaneers game with you and Scotty. Over the next year, I called Kelly every time I returned to Virginia and we met. There have been a few times I've booked trips back east when I didn't really need to be there. It wasn't a love story from the start. We were just good friends who loved spending time together. I took Kelly and Scotty to the final game of the season that year. The Buccaneers needed a win to make the playoffs, and they did just that. Scotty was overjoyed at the victory. That night, after Scotty had gone to bed, Kelly came to my room, and we became more than just good friends. When Kelly knocked on my door, I was watching a local sports channel that was doing an in-depth analysis of the Buccaneers game. She was the last person I expected to see at such a late hour. Something happened? I asked with genuine concern. Is Scotty okay? No, everything's fine, she replied with a smile, and Scotty is sleeping peacefully, happy that his Buccaneers are going to the playoffs. I was just hoping we could have a drink and talk. I looked down at my boxers and t-shirt. Let me put my pants on, I said, leaving the door open to find the pants. I thought I threw them on the chair in the corner. They weren't there. No need, Kelly said, pushing the door open and stepping inside. I frantically looked for my trousers, which were neither on the chair nor on the floor. I started searching around the room, which made Kelly laugh. Now my face was as red as a fire engine. "If you're uncomfortable, I can level the playing field," Kelly smiled, unzipping her skirt and letting it fall to the floor. "Now we're both in our underwear. Pour me a drink and sit down." I went to the minibar and pulled out 2 small bottles of rum and 2 cans of Coca-Cola. Like I said, I'm not a big drinker, but I do enjoy rum and Coke every now and then. While I was mixing drinks, Kelly climbed onto my bed and sat cross-legged. After I served Kelly her drink, I looked around, trying to find a place to sit. Kelly noticed me looking around and realized what I was struggling with. She patted the bed next to her. "Come on, sit here. I don't bite." Still bright red, I nodded and sat down next to her. I quickly took a long sip of my drink. I felt the rum flow through my body and relaxed a little. We talked for a while, and when we finished drinking, I took her cup and asked if she wanted more. She shook her head, and I waited for her to get up. I thought she would go to her son. I was completely wrong. Not knowing what to do, I put the cups in the trash can and sat down again. When I did, Kelly kissed me. She saw my surprise and smiled. "I've been waiting months for you to kiss me. I thought you still thought I was that unavailable cheerleader from high school. I assure you, I'm not that anymore." Kelly read me like an open book. There were many times when I wanted to kiss her, but was afraid. I didn't want to risk losing her as a friend. I leaned over and kissed her. We made love. Lying in each other's arms, I suddenly realized that I had not used protection. I stood up on my right elbow and looked at Kelly. "Sorry, I forgot to use protection." She stroked my cheek and smiled. "I don't care. If you get me pregnant, I'll be happy. I love you." 6 months after that night, Kelly and I got engaged. Scotty was thrilled that I was going to be his father. A year after that night, we got married. Jason turned out to be just as bad as Kelly said. He barely spoke to his son, and he was really jealous of me. Jason was still close friends with Kirk, and every time he came to Kelly's apartment while I was there, he would tell me how happy they were and how great Kirk and Cindy had sex. I think he thought it would make me jealous. I just listened and didn't say anything. What I learned is that Kirk is still the head of human resources for the company, but Cindy quit her job to become a stay-at-home mom. I was a little surprised to learn that Kirk and Cindy now had 3 children, but that didn't bother me anymore. The one time I heard Kelly berating Jason on the phone for not sending child support, I made the mistake of telling her to forget about it. I was more than willing to cover all the expenses for Scotty. "You should stay out of this," Kelly said sternly. "He can ignore his son, but I won't let him get away with paying child support. It's Scotty's money." I quickly retreated. That December, I was to be named executive vice president of the company. The announcement was to be made at a Christmas party to be held at the Washington Convention Center. There must have been 400 or 500 people there. I was a little embarrassed that the event was going to make a big deal out of my promotion, but Kelly was thrilled. "You deserve this recognition," she chided me for complaining. "I know almost as many people at this company as you do, and they've told me story after story about how this company wouldn't exist if it weren't for you. They also told me that you'll be the next CEO when Mel retires next year." "Maybe," I said, "but it doesn't matter. I'm married to the most beautiful woman in the world." "And I have a surprise for you," she said with a smile. "Remember that time we were doing this in Kansas City?" I nodded, and then a stupid smile appeared on my face. "You don't want to tell me?" Her smile widened as she nodded her head. "Yes, I'm pregnant. Now I'll never let you go." She came up to me and hugged me tightly, and I knew that if I didn't have to go to the party, she would tear my clothes and we would make love all night. I have to admit that I'm not a big party person. I have to visit them so much that they have long since lost their appeal. Kelly still seemed to like them, but only if I was around. She still had that aura that drew people to her. We did a few dances and were about to head back to our table when we ran into Kirk and Cindy. They were late and were accompanied by Jason and his companion, a beautiful girl named Katie. I was truly shocked. Cindy had gained at least 30 pounds, and Kirk had developed a small belly, which he tried to hide under his jacket. Jason, of course, remained fit and toned, but I assumed he was still hunting. I didn't know what to do, but then someone started talking over the loudspeaker. "May I have your attention for a moment?" I recognized the voice of Mel Stanton, Triorbit's CEO. "I promise I won't talk too long. As most of you know, we were looking for a replacement for Charlie Brunner, our executive vice president, who retired 3 months ago. I knew who I wanted right away, but the board of directors waited 3 months. Well, after months of interviewing dozens of candidates, they finally agreed with me. I am pleased to announce that our new executive vice president has been selected from within our own organization. He has always been a tremendous asset, and now it is time for him to receive the reward he deserves. To our new executive vice president, Randy Clipson." A spotlight suddenly shone on me, and loud applause rang out around the hall. Kelly came up to me and gave me a kiss. When the noise died down and the party returned to normal, I turned to Kirk, Cindy, Jason, and his date. I didn't know what to tell them. Jason seemed angry, and Kirk had a look of envy on his face. However, when I looked at Cindy, there was an expression of sadness and loss. I didn't know what to do or say, but Kelly knew. "Kirk, Cindy, Jason, it's great to see you," she said, hugging each one. She then turned to Katie and shook her hand. "It's very nice to meet you, Katie." I followed my wife's example. I shook hands with Kirk, Jason, and Katie and gave Cindy a small hug. We talked for a while, and the music started playing again. Much to the surprise, Kelly said, "Randy, why don't you dance with Cindy, and I'll dance with my ex-husband? Katie, why don't you dance with Kirk, too?" I looked at Kelly with a question in my eyes, but she just smiled a knowing smile, so I danced with Cindy. "How are you and Kirk doing?" I asked because I didn't know what else to say. "Not very good," she replied. "I think we're headed for divorce. I'm pretty sure Kirk is cheating on me." "I'm really sorry to hear that," I replied. "You really think so, Randy?" She looked at me with a look of skepticism. "I thought you'd say something like serve you right." "I would never say that," I said, shocked at first by her remark, but then realized that once upon a time I probably actually could have said that. "Well, to be honest, when we first broke up, if you had come to me then, I probably would have said something like that. But I couldn't hate you. You were my first love, and it hurt to lose you. But life goes on, and so do I." The music ended soon after, and tears streamed down Cindy's cheeks. "When I left you, I made the biggest mistake of my life, and now there's nothing I can do to fix it." I watched Cindy walk away from me and truly felt sorry for her. I felt Kelly put her hand on my shoulder, and I leaned over and kissed her. "How was your dance with Jason?" I asked. "He's still an idiot," she replied with a smile. "He actually tried to propose to me. He said he was ready to settle down and would love to be with me again. I just laughed and told him, 'Why would I need you when I have the greatest man in the world?'" I watched as Cindy walked back to her desk and sat down. Even from this distance, I saw tears. Kirk and Jason seemed to be involved in a heated argument. If I had to guess, I'd say Kirk was trying to woo Jason's date. I remembered the pain I felt when Cindy left me. These things never completely go away. It's like a deep wound, it leaves a scar. I also remembered all the revenge plans that filled my head at that time. The pastor was right. No amount of revenge would stop the pain. Indeed, only time and distance healed me. As I said at the beginning, although I gave up the idea of revenge, I actually achieved it. My revenge was carried out in the only way that meant anything to someone who had been deceived. I lived well, was loved, and was absolutely happy. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next